Well, everybody, thank you for coming tonight. Just feel free to get up, get some drinks, whatever you need. Tonight, it's kind of it's our kickoff for our soup and scripture, but it's also serves as an opportunity for me to present the results and the planning and process of my doctoral work through Wesley Theological Seminary and Wesley House, Cambridge. And so I want to welcome you. And I also want to welcome those who will be popping in and out on Zoom as well. Welcome to those who are joining us on Facebook as well. So technology, we're all about technology in this as we're coming through this time of COVID. So friends, it is good that we can gather just to learn together, to grow together, and I give God thanks for each and every one of you. First of all, I want to thank the congregation for your faithfulness, your generosity in support of this educational journey that I've been on for the last 3 years. It has come in a very circuitous kind of way as we've had to manipulate our ways around COVID and going to England and staying here and doing Zoom and all of that. Thanks to the faculty and staff of Wesley Theological Seminary in DC, as well as Wesley House, Cambridge, for providing the opportunity to study in that kind of unique context. Special thanks to my reader, Dr. Douglas Poe, who really sparked my interest in evangelism as I had pursued the MDiv at St. Paul School of Theology. And he was kind enough to guide my work again as I completed this project in candidacy for the DMin. I happen to have Dr. Poe as my advisor for my master's, and he's now my reader for my doctorate. So I also want to thank Dr. Lovett Weems, who taught me how to be a better leader, better pastor, and was just so full of knowledge. So special thanks as well to Reverend David Gilmore, the District Superintendent of the Heartland District, Missouri Annual Conference, who encouraged me in this project as well. And a final thanks and recognition to those in my Cambridge Track D colleagues who offered support together as we journeyed together on this project. So a little bit about the project. It has its origins in a book that I read as I was working on my master's in theology. The book was called Catch the Age Wave. It's by Wynne and Charles Arnn. They published this book in 1999. 23 years ago, they published this book. And in the book, they talk about the coming wave of those who are baby boomers who were retiring 23 years ago. And that churches needed to pay attention to the numbers of those who were retiring. And so it sparked my interest in that. When I first read this book, I was struck by the possibilities of the church. It's great. We're going to have all these retirees in the next coming decades, and it's going to be great for the church. They wrote about the graying of America, how the large number of boomers that would retire in the first decades of the 21st century, that they would be key to sustaining the vitality of the nation's churches. And they concluded that if the church was to remain relevant to the lives of the coming age wave, then it would have to adapt new paradigms to reflect the changing demographic context. Looking toward the future, they suggested that effective churches will confront the issues of their changing society while retaining their basic theological truths. And in the 2 decades since their book was published, much of their presentiments have come to pass. We can see that within this context and this congregation. One of the concerns that the authors expressed was how the church might respond to all of the large number of middle-class senior adults who would bring time, money, experience to these local congregations upon their retirement. And the same years that they published this book, my father retired from full-time employment. And I had to confront the reality that my parents were now part of this age wave of which these authors wrote. And over the course of the last 2 decades, I've observed my parents as they attempted to balance their newly retired status and their faith. And I witnessed the way that their home congregation responded to their lifestyle change as they traveled for weeks at a time to visit friends, to visit families in their new RV, right? And I watched as they were integrated into the life of another congregation when they relocated to rural Alabama after Hurricane Katrina devastated much of southern Louisiana and their beloved city of New Orleans. So they moved to Talladega. They had already met friends there because they had parked their RV for probably 3 or 4 years previously, two times a year on race weekends. They parked in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot next to the church in Talladega while they enjoyed the race week in the fall and the spring. And so they knew the people of the church. They met friends there, and so when they decided to move and bought a home there, they already were part of the church that was there. It was just part of who they were. My parents would describe themselves as lifelong Methodists. They've been part of Methodist Wesleyan congregations at every stage of their lives. Churches nurtured them in their early years. They sustained them as young adults. They helped them to grow in their faith. And throughout their faith journey, their participation in Sunday school became the primary means by which they were discipled. And it remains so to this day. In fact, it was the strong relationships that they formed with other older adults in Sunday school that allowed them to be quickly integrated into the life of their new congregation. But over the course of the last several years, the number of people attending their class has dwindled, while the average age of the participants has increased. Their class simply reflects the condition of so many churches that have experienced the negative effects of the age wave without harnessing the potential. My parents' experience with adult Christian discipleship, it's influenced the way that I've approached discipleship in the congregations that I've served over the years. And although these contexts have varied, I've attempted to develop some models of Christian discipleship that would help the newly retired, particularly those who are new to the church, to connect with others and to become integrated into congregational life. And through the years, I've witnessed effective discipleship models and those that really have missed the mark with senior adult ministries. Some congregations have managed to catch the age wave. They've thrived, while others have watched it roll away, and they've declined in numbers and vitality. And so my experiences have revealed to me that congregations that develop robust discipleship pathways for senior adults based on small affinity and accountability groups, they thrive, while those clinging to traditional models, often centered on adult Sunday school, they've experienced continuous decline. And these observations have led me to ask some questions of how an effective discipleship pathway for senior adults can be formed based on small groups while honoring the traditional Sunday school model, and how adults new to a congregation can be more effectively integrated into existing discipleship opportunities. In 2016, I was appointed to serve here. It's been a while now. And to this mid-sized congregation, I came quickly to realize that First Church is a fixture in this community. It's physically located at the very heart of the city of Warsaw. It's been known for decades as the church that's attended by many of the community's founding families. Leaders in both the public and the private sector recognize the church as being an important fixture in this community. And it's known for placing a high value on education, as exemplified in the active partnership with the public school system and by so many of the teachers, both active and retired, who are on our rolls. The congregation has a strong tradition of adult Christian education. The long history of these adult classes, the existing relationships among class members, it's created, I'd say, an obstacle somewhat for participation by those new to the church. It's hard to get in and integrated into an existing Sunday school. Short-term small groups, we've offered those at alternative times, not very well attended. Attendance in Christian education under the congregation's current discipleship model, it's declined over the course of the last 5 years, while the average age, right, has increased. And over the last several years, it's become apparent that the current model of Christian discipleship has not been effective in attracting and retaining persons new to the church, and has provided little opportunity for mutual accountability. And so to understand then the foundation and the question that I want to talk about, we need to look at the history a little bit. I'm a historian. If you didn't know that, I have a foundation in history, and I'm just fascinated by the history. And so I want to talk a little bit about the history of this congregation, because I think it's important to know who we are. We are in some ways much about what our history is. And so I'm going to share with you some things about the history that you may not have known, or you may have forgotten. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. And so this congregation, it's been a fixture in this community for more than 150 years. It began in 1850 when believers banded together. They organized the Methodist Episcopal South congregation in this community. And within a year, they had constructed a building and they began to have regular Sunday morning worship and Sunday school classes the very first year. Largely, they were led by laity. They were served once a month by a traveling preacher who would come. And although the Civil War tore the nation apart, it divided sisters and brothers in Christ from one another, particularly in Missouri, this congregation survived the war. And by 1885, the wounds of division brought on by the war were beginning to be healed. And it became apparent when the Methodist Episcopal South Church sold a 1/2 interest in the church building to the Methodist Episcopal Church of the St. Louis Conference. And although they met in the same building, these two congregations, they remained independent congregations. They worshiped separately. They offered independent Sunday schools. They were attended by different pastors. And these two congregations agreed to invite the newly formed Presbyterian congregation to utilize the building for their congregation. And so now you had 3 congregations using the same building. All 3 congregations, they shared that facility until 1895, when the Presbyterians constructed a building of their own. And that building was located here on the town square. As the town grew, as it evolved, so did the church. And in 1911, the Methodist congregations mutually agreed to sell their interest in their building. And they moved their congregations to the Presbyterian building. And although they continued to meet, all three congregations, it became clear that the Methodist Episcopal South congregation was growing very rapidly, and it was coming to be dominant. And in 1914, the congregation exerted its dominance. They purchased a building from the Presbyterians for $1,500, and they absorbed nearly the entire membership of the worshiping communities into the ME Church South. They moved into the building, they bought the building, and they formed one congregation, ME Church South. With that enlarged membership, the newly merged congregation added a basement. They built a small kitchen. They added rooms for Christian education. And by 1918, the church had grown large enough that the Southwest Missouri Conference of the Missouri Episcopal Church South established a church station, and they appointed a full-time pastor for this congregation. They were established at the heart of this community. Methodists grew in the post-World War I era. They weathered the economic downturn of the Great Depression. They were financially stable enough to construct modern restrooms and a pastor's study in 1938. The following year, in 1939, the ME Church South reunited with the Methodist Episcopal Church to establish the Methodist Church nationally. This formal name change, it reflected what had already taken place in Warsaw in 1914. From 1939 onward, to those in Warsaw, the Methodist Church referred to the building located on Washington Street on the Benton County Courthouse Square. And to the people who worshiped, it also referred to them as the Methodists, right? They enjoyed fellowship, they grew in their faith in this location. And in the post-World War II era, the church saw exponential growth. It corresponded to the growth of the church nationally, and to accommodate the number of younger children in the congregation, because of the baby boom, right? A new kindergarten class was constructed on the main level. A modern kitchen was constructed in the basement to prepare meals for the church gatherings, because we're Methodists, right? And during this time, additional Sunday school classes were also added. Disaster struck the congregation in December 1950. Fire destroyed much of the building. And for a 6-month period, the congregation met, movie theater across the street. Christian education classes were housed in the various office buildings near the church during the rebuilding. And with this newfound energy, with a focused effort, the congregation grew during this period. And more than 350 people attended the dedication of the renovated building on May 25th, 1951. Growth and expansion of the building, the congregation continued through the decades of the 1950s and 1960s. And from 1959 to 1961, the membership took a sharp upturn. By January 1961, the membership was 295 with an average attendance of 129. In 1963, an expansive 2-story educational addition was added to the west side of the building. It provided 8 classrooms, a pastor's study, and a large kitchen. And additional pews were added in the sanctuary and overflow areas. They added air conditioning. By the time of its 115th anniversary in 1965, the congregation was on a path towards continued growth. By the end of 1965, membership numbers had climbed to 360 members. By 1970, leadership realized the congregation had outgrown the sanctuary and other church facilities. They developed a plan to construct a new building. The education building was kept while the sanctuary was raised, and construction began on this building that we're in today in September 1972. It was completed the following year, and it accommodated the growing congregation that reached a peak membership in 1974 of 650 members. 1960s, 1970s, the church, the town were impacted, of course, by the construction of Harry Truman Dam, the reservoir. Construction began in 1964, was completed in 1979, and it brought an inflow of construction workers, engineers, developers to the area, and Warsaw was transformed from a small river town with an economy based in small industry to a town located at the confluence of two large lakes. Through these years, the congregation remained steady, both membership, worship attendance, and placed an emphasis on Christian education, maintained a large children's Sunday school, and integrated new adult members into its traditional adult Sunday school classes. In the 1980s, the region saw continued growth. And then in the early 1990s, it saw the beginning of decline, primarily because of the decline of local industry. The last gun stock factory closed its doors in town, the last major one in 1995. And that left a deep wound in the town's economy. The year-end statistics in the 1990s reflected a stability. From 1995 to 2000, average worship attendance was 185. And over the course of those years, 109 adults on average participated in Christian educational opportunities. Think about that, 109 adults were in Sunday school primarily during that time. In the first 2 decades of the 21st century, the church maintained its strength as measured by average attendance in worship, number of children and adults participating in Christian education. And I looked at the Sunday school statistics since 2000. And it revealed that the children's attendance reached its high point of 35 children in 2005. The average had been 27 in the 5 previous years. And during this period, 2000 to 2005, the church was averaging a total Sunday school attendance of 90. When adult Sunday school records were compared to those of the children, a pattern emerged. The parents attended Sunday school classes concurrent to their children. They brought their kids to Sunday school, and they attended Sunday school. As would become evident, that was the last generation associated with the church to do that. In 2006 and 2007, many of those former Sunday school children continued their faith journeys. They joined a young adult class. That was seen in the stable average Sunday school participation, a lowering in the average of children's participation. They moved into adult Sunday school. And for the next 5 years, the average remained stable with approximately 15 children participating on Sunday morning. Until in 2007, we saw the beginning of a significant decline in children's Sunday school participation. The average number of children in Sunday school declined over the next 5 years. And the Great Recession of 2008 saw the collapse of new construction in the area. It delayed retirement for some. And despite the economic downturn, the church saw its most successful years between 2007 and 2011. An average 237 attending worship, and a downward trend in Sunday school attendance began in 2010. And it's a trend that continues today. Between 2000 and 2010, average Sunday school attendance stood at 88. Sunday school records point to an average of 14 children and youth each week participating in Christian education. The remainder of the overall average was made up by adults attending traditional Sunday school classes. Worship attendance steadily increased throughout the decade, and it reached a peak in 2007 and 2009, in which the average attendance was 240. But that was the height. After that, it began to decline. And by 2018, the last full year prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the average attendance in Sunday school had dropped to 67. 15 children had participated in Kids Connection, and the average attendance in worship stood at 163. Today, post-COVID, we stand at about half of average attendance, as well as about that in Sunday school. So you can see by the chart that average worship attendance, average Sunday school attendance, we've dropped off well into worship attendance as well as average Sunday school attendance. There's a precipitous decline. So what does that mean? What does that mean for us today? It means that we need to look for a way forward. As might be expected in a congregation dominated in numbers, empowered by traditionalists and baby boomers, an emphasis on adult Christian education formation has been strong. But the problem with that, again, is that integrating new folks into those classes. Friends, there's no quick fix to revitalizing ministries of faith formation. I don't have a silver bullet to tell you how to fix this, because it's going to require some substantial change. And that can only happen when we come together to think about new ways of doing discipleship. Those new to First Church and those new to the Christian faith have difficulty being fully integrated into the cultural life of the church. And that primarily manifests itself in the absence of Gen Xers, millennials in Sunday school. Intentional opportunities have to be developed for persons of differing ages and at different stages of their spiritual journey to learn from those who are further ahead in their own spiritual journey. We have a wealth of knowledge among us, and it's our Christian duty to share that and to pass that on. And so, having looked at these statistics, having developed some initial plans for addressing them, the development of a new discipleship pathway, I believe, will lead the church to recapture its mission and its call to make disciples of Jesus Christ. An examination of the church's mission, described in the scriptures, a review of Wesleyan discipleship, I think will lead us down that path. And so if we're going to talk about a discipleship pathway, the way that disciples are made, then we have to know what a disciple is. A disciple is one who grows in knowledge and wisdom. Disciples of Christ are followers of Jesus who seek to learn more about his teachings and apply what they've learned to the world around them. We find that in Luke's gospel. Jesus describes the nature of discipleship. He says, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. It's a discipline. What Jesus describes is a lifelong process, a daily discipline of self-denial and imitation of Jesus' love through social action. Being a disciple leads one to look beyond themselves to help others become disciples. It's made clear in the Great Commission given by Jesus to his followers. It's recorded in the 28th chapter of Matthew's gospel, when Jesus said, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And remember, I'm with you always to the end of the age. The Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 5:20 suggests those who would follow Christ are called to Christ to be Christ's ambassadors, to share what they know and have learned with the world, are of himself, he wrote in his letter to the Colossians, it is he whom we proclaim, warning everyone and teaching everyone in all wisdom, so that we may present everyone mature in Christ. For this I toil and struggle with all the energy that powerfully inspires within me. For followers of Christ, the question isn't one of duty or call to make disciples, but it's primarily one concerned with method, right? There's no doubting that we are called to make disciples. Jesus gave us that command to go and make disciples. Question is, how do we do that? How do we do it? Especially in the climate that we're in today, and in light of the statistics that I just gave you. Well, it's my position that a theological foundation for Christian discipleship, it has to be rediscovered if an effective discipleship pathway is to be constructed. And I propose that a theology of grace, as expressed by John Wesley in his writings and his sermons, offers a theological foundation. Specifically, it speaks to the process of a lifelong process of spiritual growth in the believer, with full salvation or perfection being the goal. A discipleship pathway grounded on a Wesleyan theology of grace that'll provide a framework for instituting educational practices that'll help facilitate Christian discipleships in this church, and I believe in the church today. Wesley emphasized the love of God in Christ, the universality of grace and present power of the Holy Spirit, and hope for a new life centered and grounded in love. And so with a theology founded on grace, Wesley put forward his theology in practice by talking about the response of those who through God's grace has received God's love. And their response is to be holy in self, but also to reach out to those in the community with the same love of God. And so as the Methodist movement began to flourish, Wesley was much concerned that those new to the faith would turn toward formalism, that is, having the form of godliness, but not the power. He was less concerned about creating churchgoers as he was with helping people to live changed lives and supporting them in their journey of salvation. And he recorded this in his journal. He suggested this about formalism. He said, religion is commonly thought to consist of three things: harmlessness, using the means of grace, and doing good. That is, helping our neighbors, chiefly by giving alms. Accordingly, by a religious man is commonly meant one that is honest, just, and fair in his dealings, that is constantly at church and sacrament, and that gives much alms, or as it is usually termed, does much good. That's what is the foundation of Methodism, folks. It's to be in the church. It's to participate in the means of God's grace through the sacraments, and it's to reach out and do as much good as we can. To me, I think that if we get back to that foundation, we're going to do very well in a new model. And so Wesley emphasized the class meeting. The class meeting for Wesley, Wesley said that the primary aim of the Christian faith formation was to prepare persons to repent of their sin and to receive God's redemptive grace, so that they might surrender their wills to God and be transformed for a holy life. What Wesley knew is that the pathway of discipleship, once one has come to faith, is through shared experience. Discipleship, while a very personal experience, occurs and is helped along by community experiences. That's why we we emphasize small groups, class, and band meetings as the way to stay connected to God and to grow in social holiness. And key was that transformation continues after the new birth as the believer goes on towards perfection. And so the class meeting was so foundational for him. The class meeting, it was partially modeled after the late 17th and early 18th century religious societies of the Church of England and the communal piety of the Moravian bands. And it's important that we understand what the class meeting was, because I believe that it needs to be we need to reinstitute the form of discipleship that Wesley first laid out in the class meetings. The class meeting became so vital and integral part of the Methodist polity that seems so clearly expressed its values, the mixtures of individual and collective piety and fellowship. John Wesley himself recognized it's important. He said he saw the class meeting as a means of closely assessing the spiritual lives of its members. If you want to know the spiritual lives of a member, if you want to know where they are in their faith, the class meeting was key to that. In a plain account of Christian perfection, he wrote, never omit meeting your class or band. These are the very sinews of our society, and whatever weakens or tends to weaken our regard for these or our exactness in attending them strikes at the very root of our community, meaning the church. Never omit meeting your class or band meeting. And when Methodism came to America, it was the class meetings and the bands that Wesley had outlined that saw such great success as Methodism grew in America. Problem, though, was that it grew quickly. And when it grew quickly, we tended to build more permanent churches, bigger churches, have well-educated clergy rather than rely on the laity. It became institutionalized. And guess what? We forgot about the class meetings. The class meetings were replaced by what? Sunday school, with a well-educated person up front giving you the knowledge, right? Imparting the knowledge to you, rather than to have a close group of folks who are holding each other accountable in discipleship. And so it just became another means of educating folks. And I think that because we've got away from our roots of the class meetings, I believe that that accounts for a lot of our decline, not just this congregation, but Methodism generally. And so I think we need to look back at our roots and recapture the class meeting. And so with all of that knowledge, all of the things that background, then the question became, what do we do here? What do we do with that? In light of all of that history of this congregation, all of the history of Methodism and its growth and then decline, what do we do with that for adult discipleship in this congregation? And also, how can an effective discipleship pathway for senior adults be formed based on small groups while honoring the traditional Sunday school model? Because we are tied to the Sunday school model. How can adults new to a congregation be more effectively integrated into existing discipleship opportunities in the church? Well, this project in the fall of 2020, as part of my classwork, I was involved in a project seminar to develop a formal proposal, and that formal project approval came in December of 2020. It was approved by the faculty of Wesleyan Theological Seminary, the administrative council. I gave them a copy, and we read through it as well of the proposal. The DS also gave its approval for it. And so in November of 2020, that project seminar, the question came and was developed: what adult discipleship model can be developed and implemented to engage more people in adult Sunday school classes and small group studies at First United Methodist Church in Warsaw? And so a project, it was approved by the by everyone, and the project thesis reader was assigned. And so I began looking at all of this, began having some informal discussions with church leadership, researched effective discipleship pathways by engaging in conversation colleagues who are serving churches throughout the state, large congregations, small congregations, congregations in the middle like us, and on what do they do with adult discipleship, and particularly what do they do with newly retired folks and those who new adults to the congregations, and what kind of pathway were they developing? And so I began to have those informal conversations, but I also had learned that there is no quick fix to these things. And so you can't just come up with something and say, here, this is for the congregation just to eat up and to adopt. It doesn't work that way, because it requires adaptive change, and adaptive change is hard. Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky in their book Leadership on the Line talk about this kind of change and how difficult it is. He said, Lovett Weems put it this way. He said, no matter what the proposed change, it will never take hold until it takes hold in the various dimensions of the organization's culture. Culture includes common language, physical space, symbols, rituals, congregational heroes, daily routines, and cultural network of organizational life. Friends, it's taken me this many years, almost 6 years now, to come to know and have a feel for the culture of this congregation. And so change will not happen unless we begin to change the culture as well. And that's very difficult. It has to be based on trust, and it has to be in such a way that this congregation will say, yes, we're in, and we're going to try this, and we're going to try something new, because it's not about us, it's about the future. But in the middle of all this, we had a pandemic. And that caused all sorts of difficulties from completing this project. I had intended to launch this project by preaching a sermon series in the spring of 2021, last year, to establish the tone for exploring discipleship here at First Church. But the increasing positivity rate for COVID, we shifted from in-person worship to online only. We suspended all of the adult Christian education ministries, and try to develop some alternative plans. It's been a struggle, and I'm sure that it's been a struggle with you in your life as well, and trying to build on those relationships within the church. And so the question became, well, what do we do for adult discipleship when we get back? It was proposed that we implement and do an alpha program so that we can reach out to the community. It was very difficult to do when COVID numbers spiked again, so we had to postpone that. And I talked with with Cliff about the possibility of let's do an examination of Kevin Watson's book on the class meeting and see if we can't do that as a way of getting people back involved. All of that had to be postponed. So I did preach the message series that was supposed to kick this off, right? But it was a message series based on Proverbs called Seeking Wisdom. You may remember it. And throughout the message of this series, it was all about trying to grow in your faith, trying to seek wisdom, right? And wisdom is different than knowledge. And it talks about growing deeper in your faith. And so I preached the message. The problem was that I couldn't follow it up with a distinct program and to get more people involved in setting this all out. So what did I do? I began to collect data. And so for the purposes of this project, I looked at informal conversations with folks. I did a congregational survey. I engaged in group discussions and some one-on-one interviews. Began with an examination of documents and personal observations and informal discussions. All of those things gave me just all sorts of information that would allow me to develop a new discipleship pathway. And I want to share a few things with you on the survey in particular. I had 60 folks who filled out the survey, which I thought was remarkable. And some curious things. The average age was 67.7 years. 34 female, 26 male, so pretty divided there. 55 married, 4 single, 1 widowed. Only 7 people who filled out the survey had children in the home, right? 43 were retired. 13 worked full-time and 4 worked part-time. How many years in Warsaw? As you can see, the average years in Warsaw was 25.39 years. The years at First Church was over 20 years on average. And then one statistic that will come to play here in a little bit is this last one, which is weekends away from home. Most said 0 to 6, 30 said 0 to 6, 20 said, this is 20 of the 60 who filled out the survey, said 7 to 12, 13, more than 13 weeks, 9. That they're gone away from home on the weekends 9 times. So that's important for retirees, especially early retirees. So in the survey, I asked about Sunday school attendance and do they currently attend? Have they ever attended? And all of these. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these because I think they're pretty cool. 25% who filled out the survey said they currently attend. I'm sorry, 7% did. 25% said they never attended. 43% who filled out the survey said that they previously attended Sunday school but no longer attend. That's a remarkable statistic to me. That says to me that for some reason, these folks are not engaged in formal discipleship. within the congregation. At one time they had, but now they're not. Why is that? And so I began to think, well, it's not just about integrating folks into the Sunday school class. It's about retaining them in the Sunday school classes, or to retain them in some way for to engage them in discipleship. Part of that has to do with preferences for learning in Sunday school. The preferred method is Bible studies, with 32%. Book studies was pretty high on there as well, at 28%, and then quarterlies were 17%, and 21% say they prefer something else than what we do now. Okay. So what's the purpose of Sunday school? Well, the number one thing on there was spiritual growth. Hallelujah for that. But 25% said their first preference, their first idea of their felt purpose for Sunday school was fellowship. It's about fellowship for 25%. 20% said that it's growth in knowledge. And then mutual support was 13%. Small groups, very similar. 56% of the 60 filling out this survey said they had previously attended a small group, but they no longer do. Some of that is because of the recent offerings, but I believe as well that they just no longer attend small groups. 35% said they never attended a small group. Preferences, what's their preference? Bible studies. Number one. Book studies, number two, again. Okay, so it tells me a lot about what preferences are, and it tells me a lot about what we're doing. And so how are we going to develop a new discipleship pathway? What's that going to look like? Well, we have to take a holistic approach. So now we get down to the nuts and bolts of it. I'm going to ask somebody to pass these out. What? Hey, look, I got volunteers. This is great. Yes. Great. We'll talk about this in just a second, and I promise I won't keep you over the hour. So in analyzing all the data, right, I asked myself what the data demonstrated about the congregation's attitude toward discipleship. The conclusion that I draw is that the congregation does not generally, congregants do not specifically have a clear concept of a discipleship pathway and what it means to be growing as a disciple. And in addition, the current educational, the spiritual growth opportunities here at First Church are limited, and we don't provide a learning method that is desired by the majority of folks. Existing classes, both Sunday school and small groups, they fail to effectively integrate new people in the life of the congregation. And as a result, attendance is dwindling. The average age of regular participants is increasing. Spiritual growth is stagnating. And the lack of a clear discipleship pathway and opportunities to engage in conversations with other Christians and the biblical text, that has affected the overall life cycle of the congregation, which now finds itself in a decline. Not only worship attendance, but also membership. What's become apparent through the research is that integration into the life of the congregation that extends beyond those new to the church and the newly retired. So I have to revise my question. What discipleship pathway would allow adults to be integrated into the life of the congregation and grow as disciples? The majority of those attending First Church are not connected in a deep spiritual way to the congregation and with one another. not as John Wesley had outlined it, not in this deep growth of going on toward perfection and reaching out to your neighbors. Most adults are not participating in any intentional effort to grow in their faith. The data collected from the congregational questionnaire and dialogue with personal and group interviews, it demonstrates the need for new direction. And so after looking at some of the effective discipleship models, having spoken to leaders of other congregations, drawing on my own experience of leading congregation and discipleship efforts, I concluded that a new needs-based discipleship model for First Church should be developed based on the historic discipleship pathway utilized in early Methodism. And it's connected to congregants with one another for mutual support, accountability. It's to gather the community together for corporate worship, to deepen their faith through study and through mission and service with others. It's to be the church, folks. The discipleship model at First Church will seek to retain, to strengthen current adult Sunday school classes while encouraging the inclusion of adults who are new to the church and those who have ceased to participate in Sunday school and small groups. The model will encourage the formation of life groups for mutual support and accountability based on Wesley's class meetings and include a number of small groups organized around affinities and interests. And additional small groups will engage in Bible studies because that's the choice, the preferred method is Bible studies and short-term book studies. And in that way, the hope is that more people are going to be involved in adult discipleship at First Church, that the overall spiritual health of the congregation is going to be improved. And that's my hope. And what does this look like? Let me show you what this looks like. It's going to have adult Sunday schools, weekly life groups based on Wesleyan class meetings, quarterly life celebrations in which we get together as a church family and celebrate, right? Alpha courses for those who are new to the Christian faith, not necessarily those who are within the congregation, but those who are seeking to know more about the Christian faith, quarterly short-term studies, and coffee with the pastor, because I like to drink coffee. So let's talk about this. It's going to occur in 5 different areas, and these are outlined in that diagram that I gave to you. The first area is explore, and this means that this model, it has as its goal the formation of devoted followers of Jesus Christ. In other words, the pathway, it outlines this process of making disciples. In this case, disciples are those who are engaged and encouraged to explore their faith. And so we begin by exploring. So coffee with the pastor is one of those things. When we have folks who are new to the church, we're going to encourage them to hang out with the pastor, and I'm going to talk with them a little bit about the church. And so that's the first contact. Another way that they can explore their faith is through alpha courses that we're going to offer, and also membership gatherings here in which we would talk about membership within the church. Another area is worship. Sunday in church or online, and every day in your home. Worship. It's not just a thing on Sunday. It's something that we do as disciples every day. And we can do that in our homes. Grow. If there's one thing about Wesleyan means of grace for discipleship, it is to grow in your faith. Grow through prayer, study, reading the scriptures, Sunday school, life groups. All of that is about growing deeper, putting down deeper roots. And you'll hear more about that in this follow-up series that I'm doing. Serve. Wesley was all about social holiness, reaching out and helping others who are in need. At First Church, in the community, giving to the needs of others, all of that, reaching out to do the most good that we can. Share. And I think this is one area that we lack as well, because as the church grew and we became more institutionalized and more professional in its leadership, then the things that caused the enormous growth were put aside as well. And that was primarily witnessing and sharing about your faith. Tell your story. Invite somebody else, someone else. Help others to take their next step and walk with others in the faith. And all of these things are connected. There's no starting point here. Some of us may be in the growing state. So some others may be in that point in which we're always sharing our faith and we're growing deeper in our faith. But the whole process is centered around becoming devoted followers of Jesus Christ. All of these things are important. And so by inviting the congregation then into the process of examining its history, these core values, considering discipleship, a new model of discipleship has emerged. And I think that this will build on our congregational strengths. It outlines a process of adjusting its ministry so that it'll continue to be a faithful instrument for the redemption of the world well into the future, friends. This congregation is not going anywhere. We have too much history there. But I do think that we need to be growing deeper in our faith. And as part of that, it's inviting others to grow in their faith as well. So it's my hope that these changes will take hold in the various dimensions of the congregation so that it can become more effective and so that it can fulfill its mission to form devoted followers of Jesus Christ by meeting people where they are and helping them take the next step of faith. Conclusions. So I reflect on this in the implementation of this project, several observations and recommendations, particularly for those who are joining us and who are hearing this recording. Recommendations. I want to offer first some recommendations regarding the sermon series. If you're planning on doing a sermon series and you're listening to this to launch a program, here's what I want to share with you. You need to share the sermon series earlier in the process. This was supposed to be the seed planting effort to try to engage the congregation, to get them to think about personal spiritual growth and what it means to be a committed disciple of Jesus. But as it was presented, the series emphasized Wesleyan foundations. But we weren't able to do it in a timely fashion. It was supposed to be right on the heels of the launch of small groups of Alpha. It was supposed to be begin in the fall of 2021. We were supposed to be meeting as Wesleyan class meetings in life groups by now. In many ways, I underestimated the resistance to change, one. And in hindsight, I would have invested more time in planning the series around examination of the mission and purpose of the church, providing an opportunity in worship for congregations or for the congregants to mourn their felt losses regarding the way things used to be. We haven't had that opportunity. And I think that we're going to have to take an opportunity to have conversations around what it means to mourn some of the loss of some of the ways that things used to be. Anytime there's change, there's loss. And we need to celebrate those things that went well and celebrate them, but also move on. Because the worship series was preached prior to the administration of this questionnaire as well, and the compilation of data, the assumption that I had made was that the congregants would hear all of the messages in the sermon series. Then I looked at the questionnaire and how many people are gone and travel. The Arns mentioned travel for the newly retired, but not those who had been retired for quite some time. I needed to have a way to be able to have folks hear that series later on. You can still go back, by the way, and listen to it with new ears now. But I would have emphasized it a lot more. I would have done that in order to build up some momentum for it. Regarding the congregational survey, thank you if you filled one of those out. It was very challenging work to work with retirees to develop a discipleship pathway during the COVID pandemic. I can't change that. But what I can say is that we're coming out of this, and now is a great opportunity for us to adopt some of the new pathway and to look forward to deeper growth. But I was only able to sample 60 adults. That sounds like a lot, but I think if we look at the statistics, I think there's a segment that we were missing, and it's really the ones that we were missing on regular attendance, the younger folks with families. I had also planned on holding the personal interviews and group discussions earlier in the process instead of later on, and the pandemic was part of that. Here's the takeaways. It's my hope, it's my prayer that through the efforts that we've engaged in this project, that it's going to be a catalyst, not just for our congregation, but for other congregations. That they're going to seek to those congregations that are looking for new models of adult discipleship. I hope that they'll look at this and they'll look at our congregation and what we've gone through and what we will go through as an example of how we can change and how we can begin to reverse the decline in our discipleship here at the church. If churches in the Wesleyan tradition are to be faithful in their call to make disciples, they must refocus their efforts on the things that have proven to be most effective over time. And I believe the model outlined in this project to be the true to our Wesleyan roots. And I believe that it points to a future in which the church will continue to be faithful to its call. Thank you so much for your attentiveness and listening to this. And I will open it up for some questions if you have questions. Yep.
There was a time when, in recent history, when our annual conference was slow to remove non-attending members from our roles. Did that have anything to do with your earlier comments about membership?
With the statistics, yes. As I looked at the statistics, there were two major, what I call purges within the membership roles that happened. But I would go back to that and say that with those purges, to me, that's a sign as well of a lack of discipleship. Is membership has no benefits. It only has responsibilities. And So I would say that, there were 2 times in which we purged the numbers. Yep.
This is the first time I've heard anything about a survey. How is that distributed? Were certain individuals selected to fill out the thing, or was it a mass mailing or?
Nope, it was done in service 3 weeks, for 3 weeks. And it may be in a time that you weren't here. And that's what I said, I underestimated that, the amount of travel and time that people would be away.
I had a lot of issues during that time.
Correct, right. Yeah, and I would have found different ways. If I would have done this differently, I would have found different ways of trying to get surveys out. The reason I did it in service was because I got 98% return rate. Yes.
Well, I was gonna say also to that, Sharon, his goal was to be anonymous. So it's not like he could specifically send it to you and have you send it back, because then he would have known all your
Right,
answers.
I would have,
That was you. Does that
yeah,
make sense?
yeah, I would have had to have somebody.
So people have filled it out
Yeah.
anonymously at church and put it in a basket. So it wasn't going in.
Yeah.
So you didn't know whose answers were.
But they knew it was for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Sarah passed it out as they got the votes.
Yep. So yeah, it was three weeks. I had it available for 3 weeks. So, other questions?
Not to monopolize things.
Yeah.
I wrote down several things.
Oh, good. What you got?
You were talking about coffee with the pastor.
Yes.
For new people in the church.
Yeah.
I would just like to say that I personally would like the opportunity to sit down and visit with a pastor.
Sure.
We don't get that opportunity. We don't have it before church, really. We don't have it after church. The pandemic and the separation, physical separation, had something to do with that.
Right.
But I sometimes feel a disconnect, like you're not a part of my life, or I'm not a part of your life.
Yeah.
Because we don't have any personal connection other than I come and sit in the pew and look at you while you talk at me.
Right. Right. And that's why coffee with the pastor is going to be a part of that, but it's also going to be these times in which we can get together as regularly as the community of faith, so that we can do that in a casual setting.
Right, and if I could, just one more thing.
Yep.
I think a lot of our disconnect happened when we split our congregation.
Okay.
And the young people tend to come to the later service. And I totally get that. I would too. But the old ones of us who have grown in our faith over many years, we have no opportunity to share our faith with the younger people. And it's all the younger people who are at the second service, and they apparently don't feel like they have sufficient faith to share with anybody, maybe.
Well,
I mean, it's just kind of a,
it feels disconnected, and that
it does feel
and
disconnected.
that's a difficulty that the congregations with
And
multiple
I
services
don't
have.
really see how we can get past that and become one church. Does anybody else feel like we're two different congregations?
It's absolutely true.
That we have nothing in common with one another except we meet in the same building.
Right.
I have no clue who goes to the second.
And that's why with a discipleship pathway, this is to integrate everybody together. It's, you have the opportunity to be in a small accountability group, in a small group with people from both services. That's not going to happen on Sunday morning. it won't happen on Sunday morning. It has to happen on a different day. And as part of this model, I say it needs to happen primarily not in the church.
Right. However, with the younger demographic of those who go to second service, most of them work. Most of them have children,
Right.
grandchildren in the home. Finding an evening as someone who used to have that child in the home and working full time,
How do you do it?
see who's here tonight.
But
Is
Sharon,
there
I'm gonna
anyone?
Sharon, I'm gonna disagree with you on that, because I go to the second service
Yeah,
and I am one of the youngest
yeah,
at that service.
I think so.
Well,
That
then
gets
we
in
have
that
another
service is not
problem,
as young
don't
as you
we?
think it is.
Right.
It's mostly retired.
Yeah,
It's not that young.
yeah. I think that's a
Why
miss.
can't we come together?
Like our contemporary, because I prefer contemporary music, that's why I go to it, but, so I think it's a music preference as much as anything.
Right.
So it's not an age, I would disagree. It's
Yeah,
not an age.
it's-
You
it's-
see people with grandchildren there.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily see those parents there.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you go, I don't, so you
Right.
have that insight.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have,
Trying the second service,
Yeah.
I don't like the music.
Well,
That's why there's a second service.
all right. You know, and there are ways that we can integrate ourselves as a church, but that's not going to happen on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
That's going to happen at our fellowship dinners, in small groups.
which also was impacted by
COVID.
and
Yeah.
it's hard to get going again.
Yep. But we will try to do that. We have them scheduled. So, yeah. Other questions on discipleship, how to integrate more folks. What do you think about the model? I think it sounds good on paper. We'll see. I look forward to hearing what, over the next several months, how we're gonna move forward with it. So.
How does a life group compare to a small class study? Would you explain life?
Yes.
group to me?
A life group is basically it's based on a Wesleyan class meeting model, which is a small group for accountability. It's asking hard questions of one another. Where did you see God this week? Where have you fallen away this week? It's building trust in a small group, not to study, not at all about head knowledge, not all about learning more about the Bible. It's about holding one another accountable for their faith.
Could you describe, okay, maybe you describe kind of the agenda would be to answer two of those questions.
Well, we'll get more of it as we take a look at Watson's The Class Meeting. And I'm going to encourage folks to read this book and encourage the Sunday school classes in particular to take a look at it over a number of weeks, because it'll explain specifically what those life groups are. Life groups are to hold one another accountable. Small groups are different than life groups. Small groups are based on, they can be Bible studies. They can be based on affinity, a group that likes to sing, for instance. Those are different than life groups. Other questions on this?
I have a question. Moment.
Sure.
I find myself after church services over, not having time to visit. I mean, I speak. Visit. And
We've got that coffee room. Fellowship.
I like. See people, there's a person or two that I thought I might have some influence over, positive influence, I would say.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely.
And I want to be sure that I get to speak to that guy every Sunday, but it just seems like people get out so quick. We gotta go to Sunday school, or there's just not any time to really mentor or discourage, or I discourage people sometimes. I ran a couple of off of it because there's two of us. I don't know that.
But you'd like-
They quit coming, that's all I know.
Okay. All right.
So I just say right there, right during that time, is a good time to encourage people. They want to come back. They want to see you. Maybe they want to come to see you. I don't know for sure. But I'm just saying that's a time for me to try to influence people that be around them
Mhm.
and just something about that time that I think we lose the opportunity.
After service, before Sunday school for most folks. Okay.
It's crowded, try to get over to put your things in that, and you just don't, unless you've gone over someone, you're not gonna be able to get over to see that person.
Right.
And I want to say everybody, but I mean, there's some people, I feel like need encouragement, and those are the people I want to see.
Mhm.
And I just don't have that opportunity. It just doesn't happen.
Right. And
And I don't know how to correct it, but
well,
there's something wrong about that.
well, one of the ways that we begin to change that is to talk about it. And yeah, that's it. I appreciate that you bringing that up, because timing of services and Sunday school, traditional Sunday school, it's yeah. How do you work with that?
That's the story I'm sticking to.
All right.
I think a lot of that is because of COVID, we couldn't linger after church service, we all had to get out.
Yeah.
And you're
kind of
kind of-
forced to get out.
Right.
And you're still
Right.
kind of in that mode of thinking,
Yep.
and now that things have gotten better and stuff, I think I'm seeing more of that hanging around more, and
Yeah.
getting to a little bit,
Good time to hang around.
I mean, it could be that we could sacrifice 5 or 10 minutes of Sunday school hour.
Well, we have about 15 minutes from the time your services are over before we're supposed to start.
Right.
But we don't, we all rush down.
You all
here.
rush down. Correct. Yep. So
I don't, I'm usually late.
you're usually on time. So yeah.
Where's Dick? Where's Dick?
All right.
Hurry up or talk.
So any other questions? All right. Well, thank you.